So, Denyce, we have many questions coming in here, and one is about this vision of the Denyce Graves Foundation and your work moving forward. We have a few people that noted you announced in the glorious concert that that was your last orchestral performance, with opera performances still coming up. And these same people noted your direction, your directing of opera. Could you talk about the connection of your directing, the choices of operas that you make with this vision within the Graves Foundation? How are those connected, and are they?
Well, thank you for the question. So much of my career, honestly, has been led by God. And I've just tried to listen and follow. The choice to become a stage director was a gift that was given to me by Ryan Taylor, who is the general manager of the Minnesota Opera. I had worked there for years, and they were doing, and a lot of people know me for my portrayals as Carmen in the opera. And he called me and he said, you know, you've done so many productions. What would you think about directing it? I mean, I was driving the car, I nearly drove the car off the road when he asked me that. And I said, you know, over these years, I've had so many ideas, and I've learned so much from so many directors that I've worked with, and this is an opera that I know backwards and forwards. I know everybody's part, and so I would be happy to do that. And so that gave birth to something else. But to answer the first question about the decision to transition from singing to stage directing, and through the work that I'm doing at the Denyce Graves Foundation and also now here at the Chautauqua Conservatory, I've been incredibly fortunate. I've had a very long walk being on the stage as an artist, and I've done that for, as you've heard me say a few times today, more than 45 years, and there are other things that I would like to do. And I think it's also important to know when to bow out gracefully before they have to get to cane and yank you off, you know? So there was that piece as well. But as I've been working with young artists and seeing the need that is in our industry currently, and wanting to prepare them for a world that is constantly changing, I feel so passionate about these young people because I've had my turn. And I just thought during COVID, oh my goodness, you know, they have spent their lives and their parents have spent their treasures helping to educate these young people for this business. And I see my responsibility as greater than teaching scales and arpeggios, and there's nothing wrong with that, and I don't mean any slight in that. They have to know that in order to have the career. But after they learn that, and as they continue to learn that, what do we send them out into? How do we prepare them to take the next step? And that's how I saw that as a really important piece that I wanted to be a part of, because some of my students would come in and upset that they didn't get this, or cry when they didn't get that, or say, you know, I've done so many auditions and when is it going to happen, and that sort of thing, and I just wanted to respond to that. So that's where that comes from. And also Damien Jeter, who's here in the audience today, who, if you have the opportunity tomorrow to come to hear his the evening of his music from Loving versus Virginia. We also have Camille Howard, who is the director for that, and also some of his selected songs. Please do come. But he had this opportunity to create this world premiere of this opera, Loving versus Virginia, and he called me too and said, I'm creating an opera around this groundbreaking Supreme Court case, and I would love for you to direct it. And I was supremely honored, and it gave me about a year and a half or so to prepare for that, and there was a significant amount of workshopping done around that, so that we all, myself and the singers, felt really prepared when it was time to put it on. And I just want to say that, you know, people ask all the time, do you have a favorite composer, or do you have a favorite opera? And I don't have a favorite anything. I think it's impossible, but Loving versus Virginia is way up there. on my list.
Thank you so much. So I'd like to move to a few questions that are about the world of opera and the field. And the first question is, how can the opera world reconcile the challenges of producing new works representing current communities, such as Fire Shut Up in My Bones, and patrons who may just want to see the golden nuggets of Madame Butterfly? How do we reconcile that?
So I think that there's a great effort now on the part of a lot of opera companies, not just in America, but around the world. What we see from patrons is that a lot of people want to see stories that are relevant and stories that reflect them. I mean, we've got what we call the ABCs of opera, the A being Aida, B being La Bohème, which will be performed here with the conservatory, with the opera on August 8th, I believe, and then C being Carmen. I don't think that those pieces are going to go anywhere. I think that they are very much etched into the canon, and people love them because of the great melodies and the great stories that they are. But at the same time, audiences are asking now for stories that they can relate to. And when the Metropolitan Opera had to close down during COVID, they opened with Terence Blanchard's Fire Shut Up in My Bones, and you could not get a ticket to go. Now, part of that may have been because the Met had been shut down, and that was the first time in its history that something like that happened, but also because it was for the first time that they had a piece by an African-American composer that was a modern piece, that was a beautiful piece, that was a singable piece, and people came out in droves, and what we saw is that there was a real thirst for material that tells stories of who we are today. So I think that a lot of opera companies are trying to strike that balance with mixing in some of the old wonderful ABCs that we know of that make grand opera what it is, and infusing that with some of the wonderful pieces that are being created today all the time. We have a great explosion, and I think Opera America has played a huge role where that's concerned in terms of offering incentives to young and up-and-coming composers to offer us relevant stories and stories that reflect the diversity and the rich tapestry that is America. And we are seeing that the audiences are responding to that. So I'm pleased about that. I'm pleased to see that. And when I can get my kids to come to the opera, oh my goodness. I mean, I had my kids come to see, well, I mean, they kind of had to. It was to see Loving versus Virginia and to see the hours that we did at the Met. But then they asked after that, can we go again? Can we go again? Can we go again? And I noticed by looking at people sitting on the edge of their seats, what resonates, what they respond to. And we're seeing that more and more, and I think it's really beautiful. So it's about, I think, mixing it up, sharing a little bit of everything.
Our next World of Opera question is from a listener who was very curious about the pathway that you mentioned from HBCUs into the world of opera. And this listener notes surprise that we don't know more about that pathway. So how do you connect this more traditional conservatory pathway to the world of opera to what for some of us is a lesser known pathway from HBCUs into the world of opera?
So that's some of the work that we're doing at DGF, but there are other organizations who are doing that same kind of work in lifting up and shining the light on some of the great talent. If you look at individuals like Robert McFerrin, who is the dad of Bobby McFerrin, you know, Don't Worry, Be Happy. Matawilda Dobbs, Jesse Norman, Leontine Price, who I mentioned earlier. These voices and these artists all started out at HBCUs. And so the work that we're doing at the Denyce Graves Foundation is going out of the mainstream to find those great talents, because HBCUs have a great tradition of choral and glee clubs, and some of the finest voices that we've ever heard that have become household names have come from HBCUs, and we partner that with the rigor and the training of at the conservatory. So they exist. I mean, sometimes some of the greatest voices we'll never ever hear, you know, because they're not discovered or those voices aren't nurtured. But what we're doing at the foundation is identifying by holding lots of auditions and going around to different HBCUs. And again, for a lot of the HBCU students and also for the administrators, pursuing the classical music track is not an option, is not something that that they're exposed to or know anything about. But we find those students who have the passion for it, who have the talent for it, who have the hunger for it, and who go out and eventually make names for themselves. I'm proud to say that we have 2 of our Shared Voices students currently now in the Metropolitan Opera's Young Artist Program, and that's a great source of pride for us.
So this question is about where the pathway begins, perhaps even before one ever gets to the conservatory or the HBCU. You started on Sundays in church. And this listener says, do you think there is a path to bring music appreciation back into the public school systems? And another person says, how early does the pathway begin?
Wow. Wow. And so yes, from your mouth to God's ear, and that's some of the work that we're looking at too, is making sure that we get music in the public schools right away. It's so important. I mean, I think it starts really, really young in terms of, you know, people finding that connection to the love for singing, but then the pursuing of it is something else. And so we're trying to get out there and do that work and identify the talent. But in terms of music appreciation, boy, is that important as well, you know? I think that, you know, this audience here, by coming to Chautauqua and being patrons of Chautauqua, and many of you who I've had the pleasure of meeting in these past few weeks, have shared stories with me of coming here for years, and your parents have been coming here for years. And so, you know, during COVID, I think that it was very difficult because perhaps people got comfortable with watching things on television or on their computers. And now we see a return now that the theaters are open again and people coming out. So I think it's really important for people to come out to the theater, you know, to experience it live. And so I think that we all bear a responsibility where that's concerned to share that information with people, encourage people to come to the theater and to hear all kinds of different music. I encourage my students to go to everything and to hear everything, no matter who the performer is, because there's always something to be learned from that. But I think that we've got a lot of work to do in terms of exposure and education for everybody, and also making sure that we can keep that in the schools. So that fight continues, but I'm in it. I know that my team here at DGF is in it. I know that there are a lot of organizations, not just in America, around the world, that want to see that continue to thrive. So we just have to keep sounding the alarm and letting people know and keep singing.
I am seeing a lot of people resonating with your commitment not only to young singers moving forward, but also looking at hidden voices of the past and showing that respect and educating people about this. I know you're going to love this question. I promise I didn't write it. It says, do you have any experience with the National Negro Opera in Pittsburgh?
Oh. So, I didn't tell this story, but actually DGF was born from learning about the National Negro Opera House in Pittsburgh. There was a student of mine, Chantal Brazil, who was singing outside of the building, outside of this old Victorian home, which was, at the time, dilapidated. The roof had collapsed, columns were missing, the windows were out. the porch had sunken. And she was talking about this woman named Mary Cardwell Dawson. And who was she? And there's another part of this story that I should tell. During COVID, as I reached out to a lot of my students to find out what they were doing and how they were surviving that. One of the things that I love to do is to cook. And so when I had students who were preparing for an audition tour or a recital or a big competition, I would have them at our home and we would run through their material and then I would cook. And they loved this. And they'd say, oh, Miss D, when can we come to your house again, you know, for a Liederabend or a little run through of the recitals and cook. So I tried to, during COVID, I tried to create that online. And you can watch it. It's on YouTube. It's called Cooking with Denyce. And so what I would do is go into the homes. This was all done virtually, obviously, virtually, and speak with my students and speak with guests while they were preparing dinner about what they were doing and how they were getting through it and what their particular projects were. While I was doing that cooking show, I also reached out to a lot of theaters who were looking for content at that time because the theaters were closed. They were also looking for ways to engage their communities and their patron base by offering, you know, online master classes and performances and that sort of thing. So I started this online cooking show and I got in touch with some of the theaters and I said, could you air this on your platform? So whether that was Washington National Opera or Peabody Conservatory or Minnesota Opera, they all aired it at the same time at Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And while I was doing the cooking show, I was talking about this woman, Mary Cardwell Dawson. Who was she? She wanted to be an opera singer. She went to the New England Conservatory and graduated in 1925. At that time, as a black woman, when she graduated, she couldn't find any work. So her response to that was, well, I will build my own opera house. And she did that, and that's the National Negro Opera House, which is still standing today in Pittsburgh. She had chapters in Chicago, in Detroit, in New York, New Jersey, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., where she lived, and in Pittsburgh, where the National Negro Opera House still stands. It was the first of its kind, the longest running, the most successful, and run by a woman. And when I found out about the work that she did, that she created a stage specifically for black artists who could not, who weren't allowed into, you know, the performance venues, into the world stages. She lived in Washington, D.C., and one of the things that happened as she was not allowed, and the opera company were not allowed to perform in indoor venues, she performed outside, and outside in Washington, D.C. on the barge, on a floating barge in the Potomac. And that barge on the Potomac is where the John F. Kennedy Center sits today. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And in telling that story while I was stirring, you know, the mashed potatoes, people started calling and started texting and started, you know, texting to the online platform of StreamYard. And actually, Justin Bell, who just sang, ran that for me as my producer. Not just a student, but I mean, they're so smart. They know how to do so many things. And so he ran the cooking show for me. And we had over 250,000 people watching the cooking show because we had other platforms airing it at the same time. that when we started talking about the work of Mary Cardwell Dawson and others like her, because there's so many others like her that we don't know about, that have been left out of the telling of our American history, people were interested. And so while I thought I was doing a cooking show, what I was actually doing was standing up a foundation. And if you have the opportunity to watch it on YouTube of Cooking with Denyce, my husband, who's here in the audience, is a great wine enthusiast. So whatever it was we'd make, he would often offer a wine companion for it.
Thank you for that question so that we could hear that story. Denyce, in our last minutes together, you have talked with us about the vision for hidden voices, shared voices, generational voices. What is our part in that? Can you leave us with some thoughts on what is our part? How do we support this as we leave Chautauqua and while we are at Chautauqua?
Well, first of all, I need for those of you who are on social media to like and follow us. That's important. To see the work that we're doing, that's an important piece. But I think to keep coming, to be curious, to learn about, I mean, you can certainly go to the website and see the work that we're doing, but the work that you're doing here by being at Chautauqua, by supporting the work that the conservatory is doing, by supporting the work that the opera is doing. We're all connected. It's one thing. And so really it's about the celebration of great art, no matter who the creator is. And so I think that your part is to get involved, to keep learning, to be curious about it, and support it by showing up, and support it by liking and following us.
Please help me thank Denyce Graves Montgomery.